Hi there. Let's talk about mental health this morning. Many people struggle with mental health disorders or issues, brain fog, and other types of neurologic issues. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the root causes and contributors that I find in my practice when we address those things can be really powerful and helpful. So three underlying contributors to mental health can be the vagus nerve, can be the gut-brain axis, which you may have heard of before, the connection between the gut and the brain, and can also be influenced by neuroimmunity issues or dysfunction. And we're going to have a little bonus topic as well at the end of this. And I don't want to take too much time, but I want to give you a good idea of some of the things that can be improved and can help your body to improve its symptoms when it comes to mental health and brain function. So when we talk about the vagus nerve, what is the vagus nerve? The vagus nerve is a large nerve that comes directly from the brainstem and travels down through the body and has nerves that come out of it that innervate or communicate with every single organ in our bodies, from our hearts to our lungs, spleen, liver, gut, and all the way down to our kidneys, our urinary bladder, our sexual organs, and then those organs feed back to the brain also through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is also what is in charge of our autonomic nervous system. And if you're not familiar with that term, that is the nervous system that handles our fight or flight versus our relax and digest nervous system, or the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response, versus our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and relax portion of our nervous system. And that is all of those nerve fibers that control those systems run through the vagus nerve. Many of us live in a fight or flight response all the time. So I like to explain it if you think about the deer in the meadow, right? When you think about a deer in the meadow, totally relaxed, eating some grass, chilling out under the sun, that deer in that moment is in a parasympathetic dominant state, or a rest, relax, and digest state. If a predator were to come into the area, the deer would immediately flip into a sympathetic state, a fight or flight response, and would take off and would run until the deer was safe. Then the deer would immediately revert back into a parasympathetic mode. And animals can do that very well, but humans, our brains are set up a little bit differently, and we often will hold on to that stressor. We will continue to think about the trauma of being attacked by a predator. We will continue to stay in that fight or flight mode. When you think about your daily life and our daily stressors and how we live now compared to how animals live outside, or how we used to live when we were hunters and gatherers living outside, it's a totally different environment now. And many of us live in a fight or flight response all of the time. In that sympathetic dominant state, our heart rates tend to be elevated. We are tending to use more cortisol, creating an adrenal fatigue, creating a chronic stress situation that can impact our ability to process and to settle down and to be in a more controlled state. This impacts our mental health on many, many levels. So this is how the vagus nerve can be involved. And being able to harness your parasympathetic system, or to balance your system so that you're not always in sympathetic fight or flight, but you can get into parasympathetic mode, is very important. Tools for this include things like tapping, meditation, prayer, and breathing. There are breathing tools and exercises that can be used. And if those things are not powerful enough to break that system for you, there are some non-invasive transcutaneous, meaning through the skin, ways to tap into the vagus nerve and balance it out. And that is something that I do with my practice quite often, and patients and other patients, and along with myself, find that to be very helpful. The second contributor or body system that can be a part of the puzzle is the connection between the gut and the brain. We have a microbiome, meaning we have these little bugs that live inside of us and on top of our skin in every orifice, if you will, that we live in a symbiotic relationship with. There is actually more microbial DNA in our bodies and on our bodies than our own DNA. So this is a very important piece to understand. If you have the wrong bugs growing inside of your gut, instead of the ones that we should be living with that help us physiologically, that we live in symbiosis and a positive relationship with, versus these negative bugs that cause and create, they really cause havoc, wreak havoc on our mental health, among other things, and can create an autoimmune picture as well. But if we have the wrong bugs living there, then we can develop what's called a leaky gut, where we have now proteins, large proteins that come across into our bloodstream that are not supposed to be able to get there. And our bodies react in an inflammatory way to those. Our bodies feel like we're being attacked by those proteins, and we mount an immune response to those proteins that can cause inflammation in the body, the joints, the brain. It can create a brain fog. It can diminish our neurotransmitters. 3/4 of the neurotransmitters that our brain uses are actually made in the gut. And a large portion of that is influenced by our microbiome. So it is really important to get our guts healthy and to get the correct microbiome growing inside of our guts instead of the incorrect. And this can be addressed through testing to find out what's happening there and to see if that's part of the problem. And then interventions can be put into place that are natural interventions to help to improve your gut health and therefore, by extension, your brain health. The third contributor that I find very often to have a part of the puzzle of mental health or brain dysfunction is neuroimmunity. So we have immune systems. All of us are familiar with the need for a healthy immune system. But our brain has an immune system as well. It has immune cells that function inside of it to keep it clean and healthy, and to make sure that it's not under attack, that all of the right things are going on. But what can happen is some people have genetics where we have a really strong immune response, but we don't have a turn-off valve. So we have these genetic SNPs or single nucleotide polymorphisms that can affect our ability to turn down or dial down our immune system after the attack is over. So after whatever it is, a virus, bacterial, fungal, whatever it is that we're being attacked with in our immune system can mount a great response, which is an inflammatory response. But for some people, they don't have a dial down, the turn down dial doesn't work, and so they remain inflamed. So every time they have a viral exposure, bacterial, fungal, any other thing that can cause the immune system to react, their immune system mounts a response, they become inflamed, and they can't get rid of that inflammation, right? And over time, that inflammation becomes higher and higher and higher levels that stay chronically. And we all know chronic inflammation really is the source of all disease. That inflammatory response is important initially, but it needs to be able to be reduced over time. And if our brain is inflamed chronically, obviously it won't work. In the same way that your joint, if it's inflamed, will be painful and hard to move and hard to use. If our brains are chronically inflamed, it's hard to use our brain correctly, and our brains don't function correctly. There are other genetic deficits, things like methylation issues and other types of genetic SNPs that can impact our brain function and can be a piece of the puzzle as well. And obviously we can't talk about all of the contributors right now, but I wanted to give you some idea of some of the holistic and root cause medicine places to begin looking at yourself or your own issues or family or friends that might be helpful for them, those who have issues with brain function or mental health, to start looking at and to begin to make changes. There is a system, an entire body system, that is actually fairly recently found and from a scientific standpoint has only been recently explored, and that's the endocannabinoid system. And what is that? The endocannabinoid system is a system of receptors, proteins, enzymes, and signaling molecules that are on every single cell in our body. And we are meant to have an endocannabinoid system that produces these proteins or cannabinoids that fit into these receptor sites and allow our cells to work correctly. The endocannabinoid system is a system that is a master system, kind of like the master puppeteer, right? It oversees every single cell and every single process in our bodies. So when our endocannabinoid system is out of balance, or when we don't produce enough cannabinoids, our own bodies, which often happens when we're chronically inflamed, chronically stressed, then our brains don't work, our cells don't work. And so feeding this system can be a really important piece of the puzzle, and getting the system balanced and working correctly. And how do you do that? Well, anything that will improve the system overall, decreasing inflammation, is helpful. But taking a supplement, a supplemental cannabinoid protein or molecule, can be really helpful in balancing and restarting the system, in decreasing inflammation. And amazingly, this, which is called CBD, you may have heard of it. When it comes from a plant, it's called a phytocannabinoid, and it's a supplement that is very, very similar to the cannabinoids that our body is supposed to produce for ourselves. So when we supplement with that, we turn on and we begin to balance our endocannabinoid system. We are able to use this system to decrease inflammation. CBD, or a full spectrum CBD, is neuroprotective, meaning in the face of brain injury or trauma, it actually protects the brain cells from injury. It helps to reduce inflammation. It helps to reduce anxiety. It's very well documented in the scientific literature to improve anxiety, to improve depression symptoms, to improve gut health, to improve reduce brain fog, improves focus. It improves the balance between our sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. So really, CBD, a phytocannabinoid supplement, can impact all three of these contributors that we've discussed here today as far as an option, and especially early on when you're trying to get to the bottom of the other things, gut health, brain health, and things like that. When we're trying to get to the bottom of those from a functional medicine standpoint, and maybe we're waiting for lab work to come back to try and figure out what's really going on, there's a lot of time that can pass. During that time, supplementing with a very high quality phytocannabinoid can be very powerful in helping to improve your symptoms while we're waiting to figure out what else we can do. And I highly recommend that you find a healthy organic source. CBD, or full spectrum CBD oils or products, really need to be grown in an organic manner. They need to be grown in a way that maximizes the phytocannabinoids levels of each of the different types of cannabinoids, and that is also third-party lab tested to be sure that it doesn't have chemicals or toxins that it's been absorbed from the environment. Because cannabinoids, or hemp, plants, cannabinoids, so plants where we get our cannabinoids, which is really from hemp or cannabis. And I'm talking legal cannabis. I'm not talking about, smoking marijuana here. I'm talking about a legal form of CBD, which is legal in all 50 states and in many countries. It's legal, okay? Which does not give you the high because it doesn't have the high THC levels. Okay, we're talking about high CBD levels, high CBG, CBN, these types of plants. When we're talking about this type of plant, we can really it's a bioremediator, or it's a plant that really absorbs a ton of toxins from its environment. And so we want to make sure that it's grown in an environment that has very few toxins and that it's lab tested to be sure that we're not ingesting toxins when we're taking it in. So just buying any old CBD, from CVS or from, and not to throw CVS under the bus, and I'm just throwing out pharmacies or the local gas station. I mean, you can find CBD oil everywhere and anywhere. I saw some at the farmer's market the other day that had polysorbate 60 in it, which is not great. And so you want to make sure that it is a completely clean product. It's lab tested, it's grown well, it has the correct amounts of cannabinoids in it for you. And if you're not sure where to source those things, I'm more than happy to share with you where I source mine for myself and my patients. But this can be a very useful tool to make some changes and to begin feeling better while we're waiting on some lab results. So I'm hoping that this has been a helpful conversation around mental health. And not to say that our emotional traumas don't contribute, because they absolutely do. And the longer that we hold on to our emotional traumas and think about them, and when we go over and over again what's happened to us in the past, our brains, as humans, our brains cannot tell the difference between what's happening today and what we're remembering from the past. So when we go through this in our brains over and over again, what happened to us in the past, we have the same chemical signatures released. We have the same physiologic response to the memory as we did to the trauma itself. And so we can get ourselves in a cycle. So it is important, obviously, it's important to process what's happened to you and to try to find some ways to forgive, forget, release, whatever that looks like for you. And obviously, and I've been through emotional traumas, significant emotional traumas, and I understand PTSD from a personal standpoint. And so I am not trying to be callous here. I'm trying to say that when we don't go through the trauma and deal with those emotions and let them go, when we continue to have them and hold on to them in our bodies and our brains and our memories, when we continue to relive them over and over, we continue to create that trauma and put it upon ourselves. So this is another aspect that is really important to process and release. And I understand how hard and how difficult that can be, which is why it's important to find someone who understands root cause medicine, but also understands how important it is to process and release these things. That's the person that you really want to be working with in this arena. But also understanding that there isn't a human on earth that doesn't go through trauma and emotional battery through our lives. That's unfortunately just kind of part of life. And some people process those things and release them better than others. And that has to do with our brain function, with our ability to get into a parasympathetic mode, our ability to release things, our ability to find that mindset, but also the ability to have the right neurotransmitters in order to process these things. So it really goes, it's a feed forward and backward system, right? We have physiologic body reasons why, or chemical messenger reasons why we may not process our trauma or our emotional distress well. And then also when we relive that emotional trauma, we continue to traumatize ourselves. And and when we talk about forgiveness, and that's an important piece of the puzzle when it's a trauma that's been perpetrated upon you by someone else, and it's important to be able to forgive and forget, and maybe not forget, but certainly release. And I can understand too how very difficult that process can be. But it is an important process in healing and in reversing mental health issues. So I hope this has been a helpful conversation for you and helpful in finding some contributors and some idea of what may be helpful if you're struggling yourself, what may be helpful for you. If you have a friend or a family member who's struggling with this kind of these kinds of issues, these kinds of traumas, share this video with them, share this out on your page, share this information with them, connect them with me, because I would love the opportunity to help. There is so much emotional battery and trauma in our world these days, and so much stress, and it's important to have someone that you can communicate with that can help you work through those things. I hope this has been helpful. Please like this page, follow, share this video out if you think that it's been helpful for you. If you personally are struggling and you're ready to get some help, I've put in the links in the comments, some ways to connect with me, to consult with me, or find out how I can be helpful to you. I hope you guys have a wonderful Monday, and I'll see you later.